Anger of this kind is dangerous, much more so than the short-term explosive kind. This is the form of anger with which we have been poisoned and with which we will continue to poison our children. This form of anger accumulates and is the direct cause of the frequency of physical abuse in our society. As difficult as it may be for our minds to accept, the direct expression of resentment works better than the suppression of anger to protect ourselves and each other from damage by anger. When we communicate our resentment to the person we resent, the anger dissipates more completely in the moment of expression. The anger may get cranked up to a higher pitch than seems reasonable in many small arguments, but the intensity of the experience allows the heat out where it can cool. People can get over being mad if they face resentment one instance at a time. Even if the person toward whom we are angry doesn't change, agree to change, or apologize, we can still forgive that person for our own benefit. The extreme alternative to this one-step-at-a-time approach is to be the youngest kid to make Eagle Scout in Boy Scout history, get good grades, always be nice, become a good Marine, and then go up in the tower at the University of Texas and shoot to kill everybody in sight for 2 hours, as was done in 1965, or blow up the federal building in Oklahoma City, or crash planes into the World Trade Center, etc. Displaced anger is the problem of the age. Even the people who died on battlefields in the 20th century all died in the defense of some principle of rightness they were attached to, but didn't really understand. Most of them were just kids. Most of them were being obedient and righteous. Most of them were scared. Most were pissed off, they thought, at some common enemy of the time in the socially approved way. Most of them were fighting to save their loved ones from some ignorant fucking thing or another. Most of them were adolescents ganging together in common cause of righteous murder to protect their goddamned parents who taught them to handle their anger that way. These kids, who were polite to their mothers and obedient to their fathers, were pitiful, ignorant heroes, and the sacrifice of their lives was a total waste. So this is what happens with anger. As children grow, constantly overpowered, cared for, and controlled, childhood expressions of anger against stronger adults were punished, either overtly or covertly, or worse, condescendingly moralized about. As children, we do the best we can to copy approved ways of dealing with anger to avoid getting punished for it. The result, at least in our culture, is that most people don't express anger directly. It's not that they don't know they're angry, or that they won't talk about their anger. They do and they will. Most people, however, won't express their resentment in person to the person at whom they are angry. Instead, they gossip, complain, criticize, fantasize about telling the person off, and let it out in other indirect ways. Suppression and displacement to ideals, indignation, and judgments against others and ourselves usually work out well enough that by the time we males reach 18 years of age and some elder asshole tells us to kill some people to defend some bullshit principle, we run right out and do it. Undoing the learned suppression of anger. Overcoming completely the learned suppression of anger is, I think, a futile objective. Most people do become less angry and less crippled by denial through therapy. Some people come to terms with their anger and acknowledge its influence on their lives to a greater degree and become less helpless when angry. Others don't have much luck with it. Everyone who experiments with telling the truth about anger at least finds out that people don't die if you tell them you resent them for something they said or did. In fact, more often than not, when people tell the truth about their feelings, relationships get better, even if the truth is about hatred. The transition from being a foolish hero or heroine to being free of the fear of anger is a therapeutic process you can engage in by agreement with people with whom you have committed relationships. Expressing resentment directly is a requirement for creating an authentic relationship between two human beings instead of an entanglement of two minds. Agreeing to tell the truth about anger in a committed relationship is a way to get over some of the damage and suffering that comes from how you were raised. It is a way of losing your mind and coming to your senses, and experiencing yourself as a being, rather than as a jumble of morals gleaned from whatever your sad story may be. It is a way of growing beyond primitive foolishness to a more advanced form. Telling the truth about anger for the sake of forgiveness. Telling the truth about anger means making a present tense statement about your experience while angry to the person with whom you are angry. No one can have much luck getting over anger sickness unless they can tell the truth about their experience in the present and in the presence of the person they are mad at. I'm not saying you should tell the truth in order to be a good or better person. This is not meant as a moral principle, but as a functional rule of thumb. Telling the truth about your anger lets you function better in a pragmatic way, achieving your goals and enjoying the process, instead of feeling driven by forces beyond your control. When you are willing to have an experience be as it is, prior to categorizing the experience as good or bad, and you don't waste all of your energy trying to avoid or lie about the experience, you have a choice about how you can respond to that experience. One of the hallmarks of suppressed anger is helplessness. The language of helplessness is, I can't, they made me, it's no use, it doesn't really matter, you just don't understand. Power is assigned to forces outside the speaker. The following example of a couple's interaction in my office illustrates an angry client being directed to make a present tense statement about her experience, rather than remaining lost in her mind. Therapist. Anne, I want you to look at David and tell him what you resent him for. Anne looks at David and then back at the therapist. He never listens to me. I can't talk to him about anything important, and he has no interest in my life. Therapist. Look at David and tell him, not me. Anne looks at David and reddens. You never listen to me. I can't talk to you. She looks back at the therapist for approval. David. Oh, bullshit. I listen to you. Anne glances at her husband, then makes a see what I mean gesture to the therapist. Therapist. Anne, first of all, I want you to keep looking at David, not at me, and allow yourself to remain in touch with him even if you start to feel uncomfortably angry. Secondly, be more specific. Complete the sentence, I resent you for, with something he actually said or did. Anne. I'm not angry. I'm just upset about not being listened to. He treats me like a child and I'm sick of putting up with it. Therapist. You're lying. You are angry. And you're unwilling so far to experiment with your anger to see what would happen if you were direct instead of indirect and poisonous in your expression of it. If you could tell him directly and expressively what you resent him for, you may find you feel less helpless and less dominated by David. Anne. I knew you'd take his side. You're just like a prosecuting attorney putting a rape victim on trial. I don't need to spend 2 hours and all this money to be berated. I can stay home and get that for free. David has been reacting throughout this exchange with dramatic sighs, scowls, and derisive laughter. Anne now turns to face him. I resent you for laughing at me. You shithead. Tears have welled up in her eyes. Therapist. Good. Keep going. Anne, holding out her hand for a tissue. I can't. It makes me cry, and I don't want to cry. She attempts to retain control of her tears. She closes her eyes, blows her nose, and then covers her face with her hands. After a moment, she lifts her head and faces David again. I resent you for laughing at me just now. I resent you for laughing at me whenever I'm serious. I resent you for never listening to me. They stare at each other. Anne has stopped crying. Her face is red and blotchy. Her body is rigid. Her breathing is rapid. David looks serious now, and his jaw muscles work. He is just perceptibly nodding. Therapist. Good, Anne. How do you feel right now? Anne takes a deep breath. Okay. Therapist. Okay is an evaluation. I want a description of what you are feeling in your body. Anne. I'm tense all over. I'm breathing fast. My hands are shaking. David. Your face is red. Anne. Fuck you! Fuck you! They look at each other. Therapist. Good, David. You'll get your turn to express all your resentment, but I want to focus on Anne and have her complete hers first. Anne, keep going. You're doing great. Stay in touch with your experience and your body. Tell David specifically what you resent him for. Anne, I resent you for telling me my face was red. I resent you for not listening to me. You arrogant son of a bitch. She throws her tissue at him. Therapist, good. What specific things has he said or done that you interpreted as him not listening to you? Anne pauses and considers. He turns on the TV when I'm in the middle of saying something to him. I can be saying that Martians are invading and the kitchen is on fire, and he'll go, wait a second, it's third down. Therapist, when did he do this last? Anne, Monday. I came home from work and I was telling him how upset I was about not getting this project that he knew was so important to me, and he totally ignored me. David, Jesus, Anne. You started talking to me right in the middle of a game, and it was an important part, and I just asked you to wait until the commercial to tell me. Anne, to the therapist. Do you think it's too much to ask to stop watching a football game for a few minutes to pay attention to your obviously distraught wife? David, you purposely bring up these melodramas when I'm in the middle of something. Anne, melodramas? Therapist, wait. You're both getting sidetracked into trying to prove and get me to adjudicate the rightness of your cases. Instead of focusing on the legality of your positions, I want you to focus on your anger and your experience and express your anger without having to justify it. And tell David you resent him for what he did Monday night, and make it good and loud and direct and without justification. Anne takes a deep breath, turns back to David. I resent you for turning on the football game as I was talking to you about my project. Therapist, what do you notice in your experience? Anne, I'm feeling sort of charged up, tingling. Therapist, say the same resentment again, with more expression. Anne, I resent you for watching the football game while I was talking to you about not getting my project. She stops, looking at David, breathing more quickly. She leans forward. I resent you for watching the goddamn football game while I was trying to tell you something, she shouts, rising out of her chair. She is shaking. Her hair is flying, her fists are clenched. She sits back down, panting. Therapist, what do you notice? Anne, I feel a lot of energy. I'm certainly not crying anymore, she laughs. David, what's so funny? Anne, I don't know. Partly it feels good just to let loose. Partly I'm laughing because I just realized that my mother used to complain to my dad all the time for the same thing. It's like it's the same goddamn football game from 30 years ago still on. She laughs again. The point of this work is clear. With patience and repetition, the client learns to be mad and pay attention to experience in her body at the same time. Anne eventually got in touch with her experience of resentment, and after a while got over it. What came out after was she wasn't so mad at David anymore, was her resentment for her father, for ignoring her, for giving her advice, for being cold when she made less than perfect grades, for criticizing her boyfriends, and so on. The anger that she was denying by claiming helplessness resulted in her saying she couldn't talk to her husband. It had a history in her belief about not being able to talk to her father. Later, she had a dialogue with an empty chair in which she imagined her father sitting. She switched sides back and forth, becoming at one time her father and another time herself. In this imaginary situation, she told her father all the things she resented him for quite expressively, and then played him telling her his resentments. Later on in therapy, she agreed to spend 3 days with her father and tell him her resentments and stay in touch with her experience.